Hi, everybody. Well, we're going to cover how to add data sovereignty and data residency across a bunch of different WSO2 products. Starting with identity, we've been lucky to partner with WSO2 Escardio, now known as WSO2 Identity, for the last 2 years, implementing this technology. And so quick background on our company, it's called InCountry. Our focus has been on data deglobalization. We were founded 7 years ago. I worked on SAML 25 years ago, believe it or not. So I'm old, and the company's been around for a while. And basically, the idea is to have secure digital twins that run inside of other countries while maintaining a global IAM solution. And the beauty of this is you don't have to run a separate system in each country, and you can satisfy the regulatory requirements in a variety of countries. Our technology has been deployed and running in places like China, Saudi Arabia for several years, so it's survived a lot of regulatory scrutiny. And the way it's implemented is like a CASB or a WAF, for those of you from the security industry. It deploys on the edge. We have multi-tenants available in numerous countries around the world, but it can also be deployed as a single tenant on any cloud. This is particularly of interest to pharmaceutical companies because they're on their own update schedule. In Africa, we can deploy in AWS Outposts, and then also it can run on premises within any cloud, which is pretty interesting to telcos, actually. So this is a little proprietary, but like the technology's been proven by a lot of very, very large customers in very, very large markets and strictly regulated markets. We're even still, believe it or not, in Russia operating for pharmaceutical companies. So it's kind of like the old Soviet days. These big drug companies still sell like cancer medication in Russia. So you can imagine for a Roche, we're handling the data privacy laws in Russia, the EU sanctions exception for Roche, and then the US OFAC. So anyway, the point is the technology has been very, very scrutinized in some of the toughest regulatory environments in the world. So something like Germany, we find pretty easy, for example. We built all the technology with very, very deep compliance, both locally and globally. And let's dig into how it actually works. So specifically for identity, what the profile data residency does, if you see here, we basically proxy all the WSO2 identity services and Escardio services. So login and registration UI, the authentication proxy, email SMS for MFA, so the core server the global server never even knows a customer's email address or phone number, for example. And this is all powered by the data cloaking and digital twin vault that operates on the edge within the country. And people always ask, well, how long does it take to do this? So it's very efficient edge proxy. It's usually 100 milliseconds on average. Sometimes it can be 200 milliseconds. Depends on the country and the network. China can be a little slower sometimes because their firewall it changes a lot. So how does this work? Well, basically for each field, and this also works for your Escardio custom fields, you can define exactly how to mask or tokenize or hash a field. So that's unique on each side. And so if you look at what's on the right, this is what gets stored in the global server. So if you have a global server running in the United States, and you see those fields on the right, they're like masked, they're hashed. There's no PII that's leaking outside of the source country into the global server, but all the control flow and the users are still managed by the global server. On the edge, this is where you have the real values. So we automatically take them out and put them back in. So from an end user perspective, they're always seeing the truth. So first off, how does this work? Well, we integrate with the Escardio login and registration and all the other flow widgets so that we can automatically take the data in and put them back in. So this integrates very seamlessly with the existing workflow. There's 4 ways to identify the user country. And so this is where it gets a little funny, right? So like you look at the first one, there's nothing there. We've used the IP address, and we also detect for VPNs to say this is a user from Germany. Well, actually, I think this example is Saudi Arabia, right? Yeah, call it. The next one is you go, okay, let the user pick the country. The next one is show the country but don't let the user pick it, right? So there's a lot of flexibility on what you can do this. I mean, one of the use cases is, okay, a user has signed up in Saudi Arabia, they travel to Europe. They should be able to still log in. So there are some exceptions to the policy, but again, it depends on the market. We have some customers like, we're sorry, you're not allowed to see your data outside of the country. So it's completely compatible also with an SDK-driven profile flow. So if you have built your own dialogues for registration and profile viewing and things like that, everything works the same. And it also works, and this is very interesting, for WeChat in China. And this is both for WeChat and WeChat mini apps. So this is very important in the China market. A lot of people don't use SMS. The last time I went to China 2 years ago, it's like you can't even order a Didi cab like their Uber until you're on one of these systems. So it's a very, very deep integration, and so that it works very well locally in the China market, which is a very large market for a lot of customers. Now, what's really interesting is if you look in this example, you know, the core server here is storing a hash at cn.incountry.io. User says, I need to do an MFA. So, or the IDP sends an MFA or a password reset or whatever. It comes through to our email proxy that runs in China. And then that email proxy puts the real email address in and sends it onwards. So this way, you're never exposing the user's phone number, WhatsApp ID, email address, things like that. In the, in the core country, in the global country, it's only available within the edge country. And the same thing happens for SMS. So I think in this example, well, we're still using China. It really should be Germany. But yeah, the SMS goes through a gateway in the target country where it then gets resent. So again, the phone number is not exposed globally. And then you got to understand that everything still gets settled within the main country. But so we're issuing a set of claims and an assertion. It comes to the local country. Here we re-add it. We're re-adding claims to the assertion and to the JWT token and such, and these have the real values in them. And there's a variety of ways to sign it. Well, one, you could upload your key to us, and we'll sign it for you, but a lot of people don't like that. So actually, we let you run a very simple local edge service within the target country that you manage. And this even works in China, so you don't need an ICP license for it. But imagine you're setting up a little AWS Lambda and an AWS Secrets Manager, and then with a little Lambda that says sign something, and it's only exposed to our server on the edge, and then we can then sign the claims on your behalf within the country. But you're the one who manages the key. We can skip this. And then it works with all your SCIM, and then also the WSO2 Asgardio APIs, and also we're going to implement Thunder as well, because we're pretty excited about it. The provisioning actually works really interestingly. Here's a Saudi Arabian workflow. So let's say there's an AD trigger locally. It goes out to WSO2. The control flow keeps going. It comes back out. You're provisioning the user in Zoho CRM, and we're putting the real data back in. For some reason, that graphic is not showing here, but that's what we're doing at that step. So even the user provisioning and such like that to local apps that are only running within that country works as you would expect. Now, how are administrators supposed to find users, assign them to user groups, things like that, especially for a workforce use case? Well, we have a little Chrome extension that the local staff installs, and then they're still using Asgardio's admin panel as they normally would, and everything works the way they would expect. Now, you pull that same record outside of the country, it's showing hashes and things like that. And of course, we log everything in the edge. Okay, so that's the identity one. Does anyone have any questions about identity? And then we're going to move on to API Gateway. Okay, all good. So the next one is, how do you add this for API calls? And now we have more services than you saw for identity. And one important one is what we call the web services proxy. And this lets you take your existing API calls and run them through that same proxy layer you saw for the identity. And you can set rules for which fields to redact and then reinsert, or cloak and uncloak as we call it. There's also a REST API that runs locally. And then you have all those services we described before, right? Email, SMS, CRUD. How do you create, update, delete the local records? Local search. Now you need to be able to search locally on values, and we'll dig into how that works. Local functions and files. So How does it cloak and uncloak? Well, look, you have a set of defined functions, endpoints that are going through the API gateway. So on the edge, you say, hey, for this call, I don't want to send any first names or last names or emails through. And you set those rules on the edge, and they automatically flow through to the API gateway. With the REST call, you're now just calling that from your client directly to the in-country server that's running within the country. This way you have full control, but it's not as codeless as with the proxy. And this one's too complicated. Again, you already saw this. So anyway, so that's how that one works. I hope it all makes sense. And now we're going to get into AI for our last few minutes here and how we work with a new technology we call AgentCloak. And what AgentCloak does is very interesting because before everything was really declarative and you know what fields people have. And oh, I want to pull out that first name field out of a JSON or that email, you know, and then I want to reinsert it when I'm sending an email, things like that. You know, that it was not easy to do, but it's very defined. But now with AI, you know, even like I call it the simplest query. It's like if I wanted to know, and we just made this up, Zycotomin, if I want to know how much Zycotomin I should take, well, I go to a website and I look up my weight, my age, my gender, and it's like, oh, you're supposed to take one every 4 hours. So even the most simplest interaction now with AI requires personal health data and personal identifiable data to be sent to the AI server. So it's like, well, how much Zycotomin should I take? Well, you know, guess what? It wants to know your weight, your age, all of this kind of stuff is now transiting. So one thing we do here is we take the ages and weights and things like that, and we can turn them into age ranges and weight ranges. So if you look at this example, the PII and the PHI of the age and the weight has never been exposed to the main server. But here's what's interesting. We put the real values back in on the response. You know, so you're not getting gobbledygook back, especially if you're submitting a name. And what's really nice about large language models is they're very good at identifying language. So you take a term like headache, and we can turn that on the back end to minor neurological condition, but you never want to send that back to an end user or a querying AI system. You know, we're sorry you have a minor neurological condition, so we put the real value back in. You know you have a headache now, so we're sorry you have a headache. And the way we do this is with these secure digital twins, and they're very, very sophisticated. If you say, hi, I'm writing about my father, he has a headache, it creates 2 digital twins that run separately outside of your system and can start to mask and unmask data back and forth between the AI systems. And what's really interesting is this all works cross-border. So if you're deploying an AI system globally, you can now say, okay, I want to filter out things like I have a headache, you know, from other countries. Sometimes you shouldn't even have any health data. You know, hey, I used your product and it gave me a headache. In China, Germany, a lot of countries, that's health data. A lot of times has nothing to do with the product itself, right? You know, I watched too much TV and now I have a headache. Well, that's an adverse condition in a lot of countries for, you know, Samsung, right? They don't want that data coming into their customer service system. And so one of the ways we accomplish this internationally is we actually use the AIs that are built in a lot of these countries. They're trained on the local vernacular. So Quen in China or DeepSeek, they're trained on what slang for headache is in Hunan province, which I don't think will ever hit, you know, OpenAI or Claude or any of these systems, right? And also regulators really like that use their local AIs. So in Saudi Arabia, hey, we're using Alam. They're very happy. You're much more likely to get approved for your insurance use case or whatever it is for using a global AI for local people, right? That's really going to raise a lot of eyebrows in some of these countries. So by using the local sovereign AIs that have been built within the countries, but we don't use them for analysis or what you're actually doing in the background. It's just like, is there any health data in here? Is this a name? Is this an address? They're actually very, very good at this. And they're actually pretty performant. They all have fast modes for this kind of stuff. Another benefit of using the sovereign AI is you can translate it. So for multinationals that are operating in a lot of different countries, you can do all your testing on your global AI in English or French or a subset of languages and expect that by the time it hits you, it's been fully translated on the edge. And that's it. Hopefully I didn't run over on time. And so really what we're doing here, if you look at it, we're covering identity, API calls, and then also the new generation of AI calls, which are much more unstructured, in such a way that you can minimize the data that hits your global servers and not have to deal with a bunch of PII, PHI, and compliance of moving data across borders. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.